Happy Halloween. You've reached a fright-tacular edition of The Signal Watch. I'm your ghost, Ryan Steens. Most episodes, we discuss movies, television, comics, and more. But for Halloween, we're asking you to join me and my co-ghost, Spooky Simon, for a horrifically fun 5 episodes of Halloween frights. This year, we're talking horror sequels, the movies they made to catch lightning in a bottle one more time, and maybe make some cash along the way. And we'll try to put it all in perspective. Stay terrified. We're gonna try to make this weird. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to The Signal Watch. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Steens, and a happy Halloween season to you. Today, we have with us on this spooky day, our favorite spooky day.
The joke never gets old.
Never. I'm never letting it go.
I'm still very spooky. Simon Day, hello. Happy Halloween. After a bit of a break, we're back.
You don't know that we've had a break, but we have.
You don't know we've had a break. For you, you're like, every bloody day another podcast comes out. But for us, it's been a bit of a break.
But yeah, we decided as we're doing sequels that we needed to pick up on one of the greatest horror sequels and then the remake of that sequel.
Seminal.
Yeah, absolutely. And that movie is...
It's where we're contrasting, we're critiquing the original Dawn of the Dead from 1978 and the Snyder Cut from 2004.
So if you know me, if you've listened to the podcast, you know
Zack Snyder.
I love Zack Snyder is where we should be starting. No, I actually think that this is his best film. And we can get into that. So
I'm going to jump on that straight away because I'd say it's like Michael Bay. I think like his first film, The Rock, is also his best. And I think it's because they weren't allowed to fuck around, really. And they weren't allowed to like...
They weren't allowed to be themselves yet.
Yeah, pretty much. They kind of grew into their own, horrible failings. Yeah, I think they were kind of behaving themselves, and also they probably had an eye on the budget, an eye on the script, and
this one was written by James Gunn,
which also really helps, I think.
Slither,
it's kind of witty. It's got some nice comedy in there. There's a nice little bit from Tucker where I think they're talking about shooting the dad of the girl who's been bitten, who's is one of the people who gets off the truck, and Tucker, he's like, I wasn't even bitten because they're talking about shooting him too. So there's lots of nice little bits of humor in there like that.
Yeah. So the original film I didn't see until probably about 10 or 12 years ago.
Oh wow, that's pretty recent.
I mean, I'll be honest. I'm not I don't like zombie movies. Not as like a rule, but I kind of feel like, how many different versions of the same thing can I really watch?
Do you find them unscary as a monster just because they're quite slow? And
I feel like as a genre, it's someone who keeps hitting the same keys on the piano over and over and over. It's like you understand what the problem is before you've ever walked into the movie.
Yeah.
And then it's just kind of different iterations of, Don't let yourself get bit. Don't get killed by them, or you'll turn into one. And I get what the horror is, but
it's a little bit like The Mummy as well. It's like, don't do anything stupid and get in a corner, because if you carry on walking at a fairly decent pace, you'll probably be all right.
which I think Dawn of the Dead, the early one, really plays with, right? It's like, well, we're fine as long as we go at a quick pace through the mall. It doesn't matter how many of we're in here.
Yeah. And also, I think in both films, and I think obviously the Romero one is superior, and we can talk about that first and then kind of contrast them. But I think both of them, characters do have to do particularly stupid things. They have to kind of almost have mental breakdowns to kind of get into trouble. I'm thinking about Roger messing around in his truck in the original, and then Peter at the end, which again, I'm like, I feel like there's a kind of a poor attempt to like build up tension where he's like, I'm going to stay and kill myself. Wait until all the zombies get in the room. Actually, I've changed my mind. I'm coming. It's like, you could have been in the helicopter and well away by then. So.
Yeah, and they play like the action hero music as he's doing it. I'm like, this almost seems like a spoof at this point.
Aha! And the Crimson Pirates.
Let me talk about what I do, because I do actually like the first Dawn of the Dead. I like Night of the Living Dead. I like this movie quite a bit, and I like 28 Days Later.
Yeah.
If I'm gonna watch zombie movies, those are the ones I'm interested in. And Dead Alive, which is a completely different category. So
it's interesting as well because you've mentioned probably the three different types of zombie films there, which is like we're going to take this serious version, which Romero does. I think with all his zombie films, what would it actually be like? And it's dark and depressing, and people turn on each other, and the zombies aren't even the main threat, really.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the kind of like the comedy kind of spoofs, like Return of the Living Dead or Dead Alive. And then there's a kind of almost like the offshoots of like because in 28 Days Later, of course, they are still alive. They're just rage infected.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just like almost like the crazies. People have gone kind of nuts, and they're just killing each other.
Right. Yeah. And zombie movies depend on, which I think 28 Days Later, because maybe they're saying that they're not dead quite, actually deals with some of my problems with the science of the genre. If you want to, if you want to actually start applying rules, but the zombies hunger for something endlessly. Which means that would be a biological function of them needing flesh or whatever, or brains. Yeah. But then it's only in 28 Days Later is the only zombie movie I ever remember seeing where they actually then starve to death rather than perpetually.
Well, they're alive still. Whereas I guess the problem with Dawn of the Dead is, like you say, would they have any drives? And if they would, at least they don't run in the Romero one. I feel like the Snyder one's dodgier because if a dead person ran, their body would break apart because it's already decomposing. They wouldn't be able to run,
there's a million plot holes in these things and it's funny because now it's not funny at all. We've had a horrible 2 years, right? And we've kind of seen like, it just like little things in the movie that you're like, oh, that would never happen, of like, well, everyone's shaving, everyone's got perfect hair. And you're like, man, we lost power here for like a week during the freeze in February. I didn't take a shower. I didn't shave. I wore the same clothes because you don't want to, there's no incentive to do anything. And you go into total survival mode at that point. And that does not include your manicured appearance. And all of those people have like perfect hair and totally clean, shave that I don't, on a good day, I don't have that clean of a shave.
Well, in both versions as well, what I spotted this time was, would the electricity and the water kind of...
It would all stop.
Yeah.
That would be the first thing actually that would go. As we kind of found out here, like you need to have people managing the grid.
Yeah.
And if anything happens with the grid, it doesn't just kind of flicker. Like the whole thing will collapse on you. It'll fry, and it'll take weeks to come back up with lots of manual labor, which nobody would be able to do in a zombie apocalypse.
Yeah, because in both films, it seems a pretty nice existence once they get into the mall and clear out the mall. And they have good fun. You know, they go and play crazy golf and do all kinds of stuff, right? Go ice skating. And really, in one version, in the Romero version, it seems a bit more realistic because they're kind of like these bikers kind of invade. And in turn, because they're kind of like pissing around, the zombies kind of get the upper hand again. And then it's like, well, let's just get out of here, you know. Because, you know, they've kind of, everything's ruined. Whereas in the Snyder one, it's almost like, you know, we're just kind of bored with this. And I'm like, I wouldn't be bored. It seems great. I'd stay there forever.
Yeah, there is very, very little incentive for them to actually leave in the Snyder version. Night of the Living Dead is, you know, so super tight. It does all of the like sociological and commentary, and it, you know, throws in stuff about you know, race within the, you know, very heavily within the movie.
Yeah.
Clearly is what you know, Romero's trying to make a point there, especially in the last frames of the film.
Oh yeah, brilliant ending, brilliant.
And I feel like Dawn of the Dead in the 70s definitely picks up on some of that. So I was reading something that was like, well, the cultural cues from the 70s wouldn't really have resonated in the aughts, because by then we'd actually just given up and like loved consumer culture. And I think that is kind of true. I don't think it's something you shouldn't or can't comment on, but I think your 18-year-olds in the audience would not have known what you were talking about.
Well, no, you're right, because I feel like, yeah, the point of the original is they turn their back on consumerism and say there must be something better than this. You know, we've got everything we ever wanted here. We've got fur coats, we've got money, we've got the best cheese ever, and caviar, but it's not enough. You know, we want to find other people. You know, we want more. Whereas, yeah, by the 2001, it just seems like, I mean, it's almost like that's kind of swept under the rug even in the 2001. They don't even care about that. It's just like, we're here, we're having fun, and now we're deciding to go on a yacht instead.
Yeah, they do this interesting thing in the remake of James Gunn clearly understood what those themes were, but also understood the studio didn't want to really give them time. So yeah, they do have the line about, well, why are they all coming to the mall? And they, you know, with the, oh, well, because they're following old habits, mindless habits that they had, which is a huge, huge revelation and point in the original of kind of like, oh, gross. Like,
it's like the church.
Yeah.
People, you know, it's like, that's where people, that's the trace memory that these creatures have of, that's where I need to get to, because that's where I spend my happiest time. Or
yeah, I mean, it was this huge, like, damning moment, you know, for humanity, and they just in the remake just gloss over it. It's like just something Ving Rhames does as a note of explanation as to why they're having a particular surplus of zombies around them. The other thing he said they do was in the original was he talks about, you know, gives this very kind of creepy speech about, you know, hell is full and now it's spilling over.
Which is funny because he says his granddad told him that, and isn't that what Ken Foree says in the original? He says the same kind of speech.
Well, I'm talking about Ken Fiore's speech is like, really? It's like really impactful. And then Ving Rhames, when he does it, it's just like, I'm going to say something cool as Ving Rhames in the first third of this movie. And you're like, that was a character plot point in the original that was a big beat. And you guys just made it sound like something cool and mean to say.
Yeah. But it's also like, it's kind of diluted just the race thing in the remake, because you've got Ving Rhames and you've got the other guy, the kind of, is it Michael Pfeiffer?
Yeah.
And they're just kind of there, and there's a little bit of race stuff, but like nothing compared to the fact that, you know, Peter in the original, he's a policeman, he's black, and also, you know, he's allowed to be kind of dominant and to kind of say, no, that's a bad idea, we should do this instead. And almost to kind of be in charge a little bit, you know.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely, the stuff built in with like the police raid at the very beginning and kind of the apartment complex of the one cop is already losing it in the pressure of what's going on. And he just starts shooting people. Doesn't matter if they're infected or not. And then in this one, you don't really have anything that's an equivalent of that. Instead, you have let's laugh at mall cops. And that's,
who does have, I will say CJ has a pretty good arc, although it doesn't feel earned because he kind of goes from like total dick at the start to kind of like, good team member or self-sacrificing team member. Although I don't think he needed to blow himself up at the end. I felt like they just needed to get rid of him. But it's like, he kind of has a little bit of an arc, I guess, but it's not earned, I don't think.
Yeah. I mean, the first one feels so 70s that I can't imagine if you didn't grow up.
Adult as well. It feels so adult. When I was watching, I'm like, this is a movie made for adults. This is a film that has kids getting shot and killed. It has like, abortion issues. It has, society falling apart at the start, with the people snapping at each other, these experts on TV. And the news people going, send out the old rescue stations, even though they're not updated properly and they probably don't exist anymore. And you're like, oh my god, this is kind of a bit COVID, like you said, Whereas the new one, the Snyder one's more cartoony, I guess,
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I don't think that the Snyder. I mean, they clearly were out to make with the Snyder one an action horror film, where that is not how I would describe the 70s version. I think everything you just described is correct. I think they were trying to make points about all of those things, of kind of what are we holding on to,
the rednecks, kind of like basically having hunting parties and a great time in the original one, Yeah, and actually, probably the same guys who shot the guy at the end of Night of the Living Dead.
Oh, believe me, I was wondering if it was supposed to be the same group of people. Yeah. And I was trying to remember what. And there, you mentioned that the kind of talking heads, the news people, kind of shouting at each other. Yeah. If you get a chance, look up who the guy was who had the eye patch.
Oh yeah,
in that,
like Francis Ford Coppola.
The guy has this completely bananas Wikipedia page of who he was and kind of how he got to be who he was. He had basically no formal education, and was like, by the time he was like in his early 20s, was earning like grants as this great theatrical writer and director. Mm-hmm. And so and he's kind of been, I guess, kind of forgotten since, but having him in the movie would have been kind of a thing at that time I wouldn't say it would be like having Lin-Manuel Miranda, because we don't really have playwrights right now that people take super duper seriously. But he was a very kind of arty and well-respected guy at the time.
Yeah.
And so, it was kind of fascinating to kind of read this thing of like, wait, who is this guy? He's got a fascinating voice, and they clearly cast him for a reason. And then I kind of went down the rabbit hole of who he was. But kind of these guys arguing it's not something, and kind of how the TV people are dealing with it is not something that you get a perspective on in the aughts, which is kind of crazy because TV was still very much a thing at that point. We hadn't quite all cut the cord and kind of spilled over into, our various pockets of streaming services. People were, still connected by cable and everything at that point.
We still trusted what people told you on TV as well. And I think it's interesting what Peter kind of says to Roger, because Roger's, a bit of a company man and a little bit kind of like, I guess, like tentative to action. He just wants to get out there with his girlfriend. But, Peter kind of says, wake up, we are the fugitives. We can't rely on anything, know. Yeah. And it's kind of great when they land and refuel at that, airport, that kind of like, just like the experience of everybody with the zombie kids and stuff, it's all like it's kind of so sad when you do lose the characters in the original movie, because it feels earned. It feels like you actually care about them. And when they're taken out, it's a big loss. It's very sad, I mean, both Roger and Stephen. Both their deaths, I think, are kind of like, you kind of feel them because, I love where Roger's like, I'm going to try really hard not to come back.
Yeah. I think that's I like James Gunn's stuff. I like Suicide Squad.
Yeah.
And I definitely get kind of where I think he and Snyder were coming from in the remake. I just don't care that much about it. It is kind of like I understand that people enjoy it on kind of like this visceral level. I guess part of me also, we have the ambiguous ending of the 1970s version of them flying off and we don't know what's going to happen. And I think that says a lot, right? We don't,
Well, originally Peter was going to shoot himself. And then, which I think they might have actually shot, they might have filmed, but then they changed. And then she was going to stick her head into the rotor blades of the helicopter to kill herself, which would have been very downbeat.
You can't see how big my eyes just got.
Yeah,
that would have been.
And I think the guy,
because we know those characters would have felt a little more earned.
Yeah, and I think the guy whose head, the zombie who does stand on a box and gets the top of his head cut off, he looks a bit like Frankenstein, so that's a false head, but it's still quite cool. I think that was the contraption she was supposed to wear. And I guess at the end they just went, no, we'll change it to not exactly a happy ending because they haven't really got much fuel and they don't know where they're going. But it's at least a bit better than that.
Yeah. I mean, I get
the Snyder one kind of has its cake and eats it because it's like, Sarah Polley and Ving Rhames gets away. Although I think Jake Weber, that's a really nice, I can't come. I got kind of bitten. That's a nice ending, but for his character. But then they kind of like also go, okay, but we've got some post-credit stuff. Well, hey, they're all dead anyway. And you're like, well, why didn't you just do one of those instead of both? Because it's kind of like, it's like you've gone, stand on this nice rug, and then you pulled it away from me to make me fall over.
Yeah, it's a weird ending. I mean, it's a very kind of, I would say, post-90s. I can understand how they decided that was a great idea to do.
Found footage as well,
Yeah. And it makes me wonder if it wasn't necessarily in the actual script because there's no real lines in any of that stuff. It's just kind of stuff. It looks like maybe they shot over a day or two, but
yeah.
It makes the whole movie a joke, right? I mean, it's a punchline. It's
what was the point, really?
Right. Yeah. You've just watched these people for 2 hours struggle to survive, but which also plays very differently when you're not sitting in the middle of a pandemic.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you're not, when you didn't just spend, 2 weeks of your life trying to make sure you're staying alive while your house was slowly dropping to freezing. Like, these things change your perspective on how you watch these. It's all fun and games when your power is staying on and you have running water.
Yeah.
But when you're actually in a little bit of a survival situation, I mean, we're all dealing with a little bit of PTSD in Austin these days from the freeze. But
I also feel like the original film, you kind of remember the whole thing, the whole experience. Whereas if you mention like the remake to people, they normally go, oh yeah, that's an awesome first 10, 15 minutes. And you're like, it is an awesome first 10, 15 minutes. But I think Romero himself, they said to him, what do you think about the remake? And he said, first 20 minutes was fantastic. But then after that, what was the point? And it's kind of like, I totally agree with that. It's like, yeah, what was the point after that, really?
Yeah. It just kind of becomes a series of sequences of, that's a way to die by zombie. That's a way to die by zombie.
Well, it turns into like a little bit Aliens coming down the sewer, and then a little bit A-Team making the buses. And it's like, we're just, where are we going with this, really?
Yeah, I mean, there's no the commentary almost gets. It just doesn't exist, and the different kinds of people that they try and bring together are so kind of over the top and campy.
Yeah.
and including Sarah Polly's character. Like she has no character. Her character is to be bland and to care.
Yeah. Well, she's a nurse, isn't she?
Yeah.
But and then Jake Webb is kind of like, obviously her male equivalent. And then you got Ving Rhames. And then you got I think you got a bunch of cliches. You got like Dick Guy, and then you got like teenage girl who's very stupid. And then you got like I say, that's why I think CJ at least stands out a bit because he changes. Mm-hmm. And then you got like some, the rest of them are basically just fodder, that the zombie baby watching it this time, I don't know, it kind of worked, but at the same time, I'm just like, again, it's people acting stupidly allows it to get to that point. Whereas I feel like in the Romero one, mainly they did the right thing. Mainly they did what you would do. And if they did get caught out, like Stephen in the lift, it was in the elevator, it was kind of by accident. They caught by surprise. Whereas in the Snyder one, it's more like just they're kind of doing stupid things,
Yeah, I didn't even mind so much that, especially in an era of people deciding they shouldn't wear masks in the middle of a pandemic, that, people were making bad decisions. What I minded was nobody asked, why can't we see your wife? We have other people here who could be helping.
I'm a nurse.
Right. And it never even really comes up. Of if he actually cared, he'd want her checking on his wife. Like that would be a sign that he cared.
Well, I guess the assumption is, he heard that broadcast where it says if you're bitten, you'll change. And
I know but they are being stupid. All of the rest of them are being. It's one thing for him to be stupid.
Yeah,
he's kind of going through that, but everybody else just kind of okay. Where no one's like, we haven't seen her in days.
Yeah,
was she bitten? What's going on? Why is he not asking to have the nurse check on her or assist?
That's also an interesting difference in the fact that in the Snyder one you have to be bitten. So I guess normal deaths don't come back. Like if you have a heart attack, you're not going to come back. But like in the Romero one, everybody who dies.
That's true. Back. Yeah, if you fell down the stairs, you might still come back. Yeah,
unless you join the head. That. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So in a way, the Romero one's scarier because that's like, imagine all those corpses. Where's the Snyder one? The Snyder one's bad enough, but.
Yeah, and the thing that kind of surprised me was I was reading some of the stuff about the Snyder one, and they were talking about, we decided to. Everything they were talking about was almost as if 28 Days Later hadn't come out like 2 years before it.
Mm.
And I was like, yeah, you guys weren't doing new territory with Fast Zombies. Like that had just been covered.
And that was a big hit in the States, 28 Days Later as well. That did pretty well in the States. So
yeah, you were definitely seeing 28 Days Later, whether or not you were like a huge horror fan or not. If you had any interest, you were going. Yeah.
I will say that opening 10, 15 minutes, pretty much until Sarah Polly crashes the car, is still great. And I think it's been an influence on, ironically, it's been an influence on 28 Weeks Later, the start of that. And this summer, I watched Quiet Place 2, and the start of that is a flashback to the original Alien Invasion.
Mm-hmm.
And even War of the Worlds with Tom Cruise, when they first the aliens first come out of the ground. It's like, I think all of those are come from maybe Snyder did it first.
War of the Worlds was years before the Snyder movie. War of the Worlds.
Oh no, but I mean like the Spielberg War of the Worlds. But
that's what I'm talking about. Yeah, that was well before that.
Oh yeah, but I'm talking about just opening your film with a boom, the invasion or whatever, bang. You wake up one morning and oh my god, the suburb's on fire. And yeah. Because I think that was very well done, and that still holds up very well, I think.
Yeah, I will agree. Like of the parts of the movie,
the little girl getting in the house is a bit dodgy. I'm like, why didn't they lock the door? Does she normally come in the morning?
Yeah, they didn't establish a dog door or anything that would have made it make a lot of sense. But yeah, it did make me wonder, because that's more or less kind of, how Walking Dead does its first big reveal.
Yeah.
And
it's like you go to bed normal one night and the next morning it's like, what's going
on? Well,
on?
it's even the little girl and the reveal of, the little girl's, grotesque. Was how I think Rick Grimes in Walking Dead is first realizes something's going on.
Yeah.
Which, that they took that then from the comic book, and it, no one was thinking that a zombie comic book was gonna, become a huge multimedia franchise when that comic hit the shelves. But I'm not sure that it didn't borrow, more or less from that. It's a horrifying thing to happen, but it's also I think kind of crucial to humanizing what is actually occurring. It was interesting. A few years ago, a relative of mine was on Facebook, and he'd been his entire career had been as a nurse in the military. And he was just like, I don't understand why you people like zombie stuff. He's like, it's not funny. It's all horrific. And I do know that, it to me often feels like there's this kind of enjoyment of in what scenario would I be allowed to just start popping people off?
Well, yeah, survivalist, isn't it? Survivalist thing, kind of. And it's interesting contrasting the two films. In the Romero one, the bigger threat is actually the bikers. The biker gang.
And that's always in 28 days later. That, of course, it's the military.
Yeah.
It's always kind of, what is the thing that we're not paying attention to, or that we've allowed to kind of become toxic in society, that's going to come back to bite us in the ass.
I think Walking Dead has the guy who's got his own camp and stuff. But then, funnily, in the Snyder one, it's like there's really no other people. There's the guy on the roof from the gun shop over the road, and I think he's the only other guy they see who's still alive. And that's so really it's just the zombies are the main threat. That's it. So they really scaled that down to the basics, and they kind of lost something through it, I think.
Yeah. And
it's we can't be bothered saying that, we can't be bothered like digging into man's inhumanity to man. We just got zombies.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they treat Steve as if he's like the worst thing that ever happened. I'm like, he's just shallow. Like, that's not.
Yeah, he's just like a dick,
Yeah, he's not actually hurting anybody. And he's frankly has seen stuff, and he's telling them. I mean, he's not like withholding information. He's like, oh, you can't go there. I've already tried that. I've. So yeah.
I mean, I guess he doesn't hold the door open when they need him to, and later on, I'm like, how do they know which yacht is his? Because I feel like they'd just be running around the marina. But so that's a bit unclear. But I mean, he's not.
Honestly, I'm glad you said that, because I thought I just missed something. I was like, he must have said something about it's called the something or other.
I would have said that. I would have put that in the script. I would have said it's at least called the whatever. Yeah.
Here's the funny name that Steve would have given his boat. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting though, because I mean, I think the Romero one's a lot more realistic. But then again, Tom Savini apparently, Romero wanted redder blood, and Tom Savini, this was one of his first makeup gigs, and he also plays the biker guy with a wonderful moustache brush, which I'm going to have to get one of those. But he said, well, no, this blood doesn't look realistic, and Romero actually said, well, I want it to look like a comic. So that's interesting. So there's not so much, there's still connective tissue between the two films, and obviously Romero went on to do Creepshow and stuff. So he kind of loves that EC stuff as well.
Yeah.
But then I think his version is just a lot more, natural and darker and more realistic, I guess,
Yeah. I mean, as realistic as I think you can really get in something like that. I'd be curious to see on the other side of all of this, if you were to sit down and write a zombie movie now, how people would. I mean, you'd certainly have people who were, everyone has always said, oh, people wouldn't really sit around and wait for the person to die and then shoot. They would. And I'm like, I actually have taken all of that back. Like a lot of the stuff I thought would have been like good zombie behavior, or worrying about zombies. And now I'm like, people would absolutely do all of those things that you're like, that's horribly irresponsible in that situation. And that was one of the funny things in kind of reading some of the reviews of both movies was kind of, well, no one would actually do this. And it's like, well, we have found out people will do all kinds of crazy things that are ill-advised.
I like how in the Romero one, I think Fran kind of says, we all need to learn how to fly the helicopter and we all need to learn how to shoot. Mm-hmm. And which I think they just gloss over in the Snyder one. I think suddenly they're all like, they're like kind of John Woo kind of packing 2 pistols all of a sudden. It's like, where did they learn that? But at least in the Romero one, it's like, we need to be able to do this. Who can do this? Peter can do this. Can you teach us in the spare time we have? And even the humanity, I love the fact that I think, after Roger's gone, and there's only 3 of them left, because you could turn it into like a kind of bullshit, I guess like romantic triangle, but they don't. I think Peter's just like, they're a couple. So, he actually has that night where he almost acts like their waiter. And he goes, I'm going to give you a romantic night. I cooked this for you guys. I'm going to leave you alone. And that's really sweet, That shows they're kind of trying to hang on to their humanity, which you don't get any of that in the Snyder one. They haven't got time for that, They haven't got the attention span for that.
Yeah, I mean, they show them fucking around in the mall a lot.
I like how you put that. They're fucking around with the pick and mix.
but yeah, I mean, it's not, it doesn't have quite the same feel of, oh my God, these people really are trapped over a long period of time. It feels almost more like, the Chopping Mall, where it's like it's teens released into the mall to do whatever they feel like doing.
Yeah. I mean, in the original, I think there's a slight desperation. Well, in the original, it's almost like they fully consume. And then, like we said, they realize that's not enough. Whereas in the Snyder one, again, they run around, trying everything, trying aerobics, trying all this kind of different stuff. And then they just kind of get bored with it and say, what else? Where else can we go? And I just don't buy it. I don't buy it in the remake that they'd leave them all. I think that's a crap plan. Whereas in the original, there's a reason they leave them all. The bikers and the zombies have kind of trashed it again. And Stephen's dead. And, they need to get out of there.
Yeah, it really feels like what they were trying to do for the final part of the movie was just get in that bus chase.
They just want to have some explosions and some buses going around corners fast.
Yeah. And there's also no decision on how much a propane explosion tank or the explosion of a propane tank should actually explode. It's 2 completely different effects in the 2 different ones that we see.
It's like a nuclear bomb going off.
Oh yeah.
Wouldn't that blow up the bus as well?
Yeah. It was a lot on that first one. I thought the second one, when it was kind of a plume of smoke, was probably a lot more realistic. But
also, I find it unintentionally hilarious, and I don't think it's supposed to be. But like, I love the old guy with the chainsaw who accidentally kills the young girl on the bus.
Okay, you make me feel better because I laughed out loud at that. I was like they've gotten so far in this dipshit. And you're like, but that's what would happen too.
No, you're right. Yeah, people are that stupid. They would do that. They'd accidentally like go, "Whoops! I just cut a head off."
Yeah.
I mean, there's a nice bit with Steve where early on he's like, "If I turn into a zombie, you have my permission to shoot me in the head." And then, of course, she does. So that's kind of cool. So there's some definitely some good stuff in the Snyder one.
I think if you look at it as like it's a standalone thing, it's an action horror comedy.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember being pleasantly surprised when I went to see it originally because I remember expecting like a train wreck and going, that wasn't like The Thing or The Fly as a remake, but they didn't fuck it up. It's like, that was kind of very watchable, but it was like fast food.
Unfortunately, I have both times seen it. I have seen it immediately on the heels of the original.
Yeah.
And it's just going to suffer by comparison in my book. I am sure there are people out there who are like, oh, you're so like woke and you're trying to read all this stuff into a zombie movie and Dawn of the Dead. It's just, the original is just as, and it's like, dude, if that's how you're seeing it, and the Snyder stuff is what does it for you. There's nothing I can do to convince you, you live your best life. But
yeah. I mean, I don't want to sound patronizing, but I feel like, and it's 20 years old. The Snyder one's nearly 20 years old now, which scares me because I'm like, I saw it a couple of years ago. And I'm like, hang on, what's happened to my hair? My eyes don't work too good anymore. But I mean, like, really, I'm watching that. And even at the time when I saw it, I was like, this is probably the best film ever if you're 12. Whereas, the Romero one is a film for adults, It's a film for adults who want to sit down and be entertained, but also think,
Yeah. It's kind of funny. At the time that the 2004 one came out, I was like, what, where the hell did Sarah Polley go? At the time when this came out, she was kind of being queued up to be a thing.
Indie? Was she kind of indie queen? She was kind of doing little indie films.
Yeah, she did. Because I think she was the person in Go. I think when Laura and I covered that at Christmas 2 years ago. And she'd done stuff like that. She basically fell backward into directing, is my understanding, like writing and directing and producing. Like she's just not in front of the camera anymore. Yeah. And I don't know what precipitated that. I don't know if, it was just a lot more rewarding and she didn't have to just, sit in hair and makeup and, then go, chirp lines or whatever. Like she got to actually control things, which I totally get. Yeah. But I do find it fascinating that it's someone who was, put front and center for this movie. That was a fairly significant movie when it came out.
Did very well.
Mm-hmm. But then she, right after this, kind of felt like she fell off the map. And it's like, oh, well, she's working. She's just, on the other side.
I remember when this came out, some interviews with her that I read in like a movie magazine at the time. Pre-internet, and and it was her saying I wouldn't normally take this role. The reason I took it was it's something I wouldn't normally do, and I just wanted to experience kind of an action horror movie. And I think she's she acquits herself really well in that. She actually probably brings more depth to it than it even deserves, maybe. It's also interesting. I was thinking, just now with you saying that. So Romero always came a bit of a cropper because with, I guess competitive films, because, the guy basically almost single-handedly invented the zombie genre, right? And I know that, this did really well. I think this did like, I have the figures somewhere. It did like 66 million off a 640,000 budget. That was Romero's Dawn of the Dead, which is fantastic. When you think about
that's mind-boggling. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, definitely his biggest film. And he did, I think, 4 more zombie movies after this, which I would say probably just do his originals trilogy, because I'm a big fan of Day of the Dead from 85 as well, which goes even further and darker. It has the military and the scientists locked in a compound, pretty much at the end of their tether, because, the zombies have totally taken over at that point. So, each one of his original trilogy is set later in the zombie apocalypse. And and it's great. It's very, very depressing film. And that got trounced to the box office at the time by Return of the Living Dead, which was a lot more fun and, a lot crazier songs and stuff. And I'm thinking this remake of Dawn of the Dead, I think kind of trounced Romero's Land of the Dead that came out about the same time. That, again, was like a lot darker, a lot more serious, a lot more kind of, what would happen if, a city had been walled off and basically like, a corrupt official was kind of in charge of everything. And people were like, no, we want to see, kind of like the Snyder stuff instead because it's, crash bang wallop.
Yeah. The other movie that was released, I read around the same time was Shaun of the Dead.
Yeah.
And financed by the same studio. So they were doing quite a bit to try and keep the two movies separate. And
they are very different. Yeah,
they just didn't want to have two zombie movies out the same week.
Yeah.
And I am well aware. I enjoy Shaun of the Dead. I don't have the same like religious affection for it that other people do. But it's fun. It's good fun. It is. And it's such a great, like, if you come off, the serious, especially the serious zombie genre and the slow zombies, it's a freaking treat, man.
Well, interestingly, Simon Pegg, if you go back to Spaced, his TV show that I'm a big fan of, and I totally recommend you watch if you haven't seen it.
I have seen it, but you should, listener, watch Spaced.
You should watch Spaced. On their living room wall in both seasons of that is a big poster of Dawn of the Dead. And Romero actually credits Simon Pegg with, a lot of mutual, a lot of mutual kind of like compliments in the fact that because of Shaun of the Dead, he managed to get enough money for Land of the Dead. Because, of course, Shaun of the Dead was like, this is a love letter to George A. Romero.
Yeah.
Thanks for your original trilogy. And because of that, the studios went, well, let's give the old guy some money then, if everybody's raving about it. So that was nice.
I did not know that. That is interesting. But yeah, I mean, it's clearly Dawn of the Dead of all the zombie movies. It clearly was trying to reference the most.
Well, also the star Shaun of the Dead, next time you watch it, I think when the Universal Glow is spinning, it plays the little excerpt of music from the original Dawn of the Dead.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Of the like, of the kind of weird, kind of electronic, uncomfy kind of music. Yeah. So that's kind of cool.
I ended up watching, I want to mention, you own Dawn of the Dead, I'm sure, on disc. Yeah. So it's really hard to find right now. I don't know what's going on. This is the first time, and I think this will be like the 164th episode or something of the podcast, that I have had to watch a movie illegally to see it. It's just streaming on YouTube. It wasn't a huge deal to, but I always pay. I have an ethical thing about, like, if I'm watching a movie, I'm going to, pay for it. So
stand up, man. Just stand up.
I try, man. It's like the one ethical thing I do.
That's before you go out moving. Really nice.
But so I don't know if that, usually when that happens, it means there's a nice version about to come out.
Well, I'm kicking myself a bit because I think about 2005, I had a quite hefty brick-sized DVD that I think had 4 different versions of Dawn of the Dead in it. I think it was like 4 or 5 discs, and I gave it to somebody or lost it or sold it. But that now is about $200 if you try to get on Amazon. But that, because I actually looked, because I wanted to compare the versions, and I was like, I'm not paying that.
The podcast didn't pay that well.
But it was no. But it was, but that has like an international cut because this was actually produced by Dario Argento.
Right, I forgot to mention that. That was crazy. Yeah. I didn't realize that until it rolled. Yeah,
because he was a big fan of Night of the Living Dead. Romero was a big fan of his stuff. I guess they got together somehow, and he said, "Look, And Romero was like, I'm trying to make the sequel, but nobody will give me any money.
Yeah.
And Argento said, well, look, if you give me international rights, I'll give you the money. I'll get you the money through, my name as well.
Yeah. In 3 words, music by Goblin.
There you go. But only on the international version, not on the American version.
Is that true?
Yeah.
So I must have watched the international version.
You pretty watched the international one, yeah. And there's different cuts. There's like about 5 different cuts with slightly different bits and bobs, which is funny because like last night I watched Brazil and they streamed that because the Alamo was having issues with their Blu-ray. Their Blu-ray player packed up. So they had to stream that. And I turned to my friend last night, Steve, and I said, one scene was missing that I always remember, and I've never had that ending. And the ending was very slight. It was just like different credits, to be honest. Mm-hmm. But again, that was one of the million versions that I guess Gilliam did.
Yeah, I knew Brazil. Is just one of those movies that has a bazillion versions of it out there. I didn't know that about this one. And so that explains why. Anyway, I was like, I don't remember Argento being involved. And there was somebody else who was involved too, as a producer that was.
Well, Romero's mate actually owned the mall. And he said you can come in and shoot at night. And I think it was over Christmas. And originally they tried to do it at Christmas, but then they couldn't be bothered to keep putting up the decorations. So they said, we'll just come back in the new year when it looks the same.
Yeah.
But yeah, his mate owned the mall and kind of let him come in at nights and shoot. I think from like something like 9 p.m. to 5 a.m, they shot every night.
Yeah, malls are, I worked at many malls, or 2 malls, but I worked for many years in malls. And they're not open all that long during the day. They're open from like 11 to 10 or something, or 11 to 9 or something like that. And so I can totally see them having ample time to shoot and clean up and get out of there. So nobody knew. I'd heard something similar about the Chopping Mall.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember what the shooting schedule was on that, but there was definitely everyone's like in the parking lot at like whatever, 9 o'clock waiting for the mall to close. So.
It would have been cool if you turned up as a worker to that mall and there's all these zombies like milling around like in the morning, So.
Given the age I was, I wouldn't even have noticed. I would have been like, can't believe these assholes are already here to buy shoes. Yeah, no, I worked for 3 summers at the Disney store. In Willowbrook Mall in Houston, Texas, wore the pink and blue sweater. And then I worked for a year and a half at a record store at Highland Mall here, which is now an ACC campus, I believe, Austin Community College.
This is interesting for me because I'm guessing in the first Dawn of the Dead, the mall just as a thing was a new concept.
Yes.
Okay, so they only really started late 70s?
I would say probably the very early 70s. They probably started but weren't everywhere.
Yeah, because we never had them in England until, I'm guessing, the mid to late 90s.
Mm-hmm.
So we always watched American films, like The Commando, and we always went, they're in the mall again. The Americans love the mall. They go there.
Yeah, you'd like this whole thing now of Americans having, these places that are like these fancy outdoor shopping things does not make any sense to me, because we have weather. Texas is brutally hot, and when it's not brutally hot, it's raining and cold, and that for a month.
We just had raining and cold all year, so we're just going to get wet, basically.
Yeah, I mean the idea was I highly recommend watching the Talking Heads film True Stories. David Byrne maybe has the most spot on take on malls you're going to find. But yeah, the idea was it's an experience. You can just kind of go from place to place and hang out for a few hours and get a pretzel, get an ice cream, see your friends, run into
see a movie.
See a movie. And it kind of became a thing of once the internet happened, your kind of hunter-gatherer things were satisfied by Amazon.
That's true. That's very true.
And the idea of, well, part of the problem was, like, Jamie hates them all. When I started dating Jamie, I tried to go Christmas shopping with her as a fun thing for a couple to do. And I watched my girlfriend that I thought very highly of have a meltdown in the middle, not a meltdown, but like a
tantrum.
Not a tantrum. It was more like all the energy left her body. And she, like, I thought she needed to take a nap, like right in the middle of the mall. Yeah. And she did, and I was like, what is going on? She's like, I just hate shopping. And I was like, well, we're in the middle of a mall. Like, there's nothing else to do here. And I have things I have to look for because we're Christmas shopping.
Yeah. Go list.
Yeah. And it was perfect for if you're doing something like that. What became a problem was I need to buy shoes. I've got to drive to this place. I have to figure out where to park, because I can't ever remember where the shoe store is in relation to the outside of the mall.
Yeah.
And then I've got to go through this whole place versus I can just drive up to this strip mall to the shoe store and walk into it, which is very American.
I totally agree with Jamie, because I like shopping, and I kind of miss England in a way, because, we have our little shops all in a row in towns. But, so I still like going to Waterloo here and, half price books and stuff. And, but like, I went out to the Domain, I guess, during the summer to try to buy some shoes. Because for some reason I couldn't get these kind of shoes, actually Doc Martens, on Amazon. I think they just wouldn't ship them to me. They were like, kept saying they were too big, which is kind of ridiculous. So I was like, I'm going to physically try to buy some. So I went to a mall, and it's very stressful. And it wasn't even busy that day, but you park about 3 miles.
Yeah, the Domain's a whole other kind of like that's. So if you don't have something like the Domain in your local city, essentially what they did is there was this patch of North Austin that no one was really using. I don't know why, because it was kind of between other things that were fairly heavily populated.
Yeah.
And I should mention, very close to a nuclear reactor that nobody seems to be aware of, but there is a nuclear reactor just south of the Domain. So
you could go critical at any time.
It could. It's the thing. It's a nuclear reactor.
Like the start of Terminator 2.
Yes.
Be on the swings with my ice cream.
But so the Domain's absolutely gigantic. They keep adding on to it, and I always have to look at a map of it before I go there.
Well, Domain's a little bit different because they're trying to do like a street of shops, but then a normal mall, like you say, you park 3 miles away, and you turn up an entrance which is probably furthest away from the shop you want to be at, and then you go in and have to look at the map and try to stand on your head and work out where you are. And then you're mooching around and everything's overpriced. And when you do get to your shop, they probably haven't got what you want anyway, or they can order it, but it's going to take ages.
Yeah.
And it's just like a real pain. I mean, I think the only time I've been to a mall is when you and I have been to see a film and it's only been showing at a certain place. Like when we saw, was it Rogue or whatever? Yeah.
Yeah. It's
I try to avoid them apart from that.
So the weird thing has been watching kind of the de-evolution of the mall, and they were able to shoot the Zack Snyder one because malls were failing, and they're like, oh, that's great, we'll just take one over, and before they destroy it, we'll shoot in here. I wasn't really aware this was happening when I moved to Phoenix in 2002. And my great aunt lived out there in a nursing home. It was kind of an old folks facility. And so Jamie and I took her, and we're like, what are we going to do with her? So I'll take her to the mall. And we go in there, and it's all the gates are down. All the stores are empty. It looked more like Omega Man than it looked like anything else. Yeah, it's super depressing. It was kind of like, wait, but capitalism's not failing. I don't understand why the place where everyone used to buy stuff, but teens.
This is pre-COVID as well. Pre-COVID.
Oh, yeah. This is 2003, 2004. yeah, it was very strange to watch malls stop being a thing where it used to be. It would literally take an hour for me during Christmas to get from my house to the mall, which was normally a 15-minute drive, just to get into the mall to do my Christmas shopping because it was so popular. And you would circle the mall, then looking for a parking space for like 30 minutes.
Ooh.
And eventually get one, and then you could do your shopping. Well, this always meant my brother went to a meltdown. My brother is 2 years older than me, and he'd go, "I'm just not going to buy anybody anything this year." And I'd be like, "That's not an option. You have to do it."
You must run the gauntlet of them all.
Yeah, I was like, "This is how it works, buddy. We're doing it all in like the next 3 hours. So buckle up."
See, that's my idea of hell. I kind of agree with Jamie. So, and I've been dragged around the malls before, but in England, we kind of started copying them. And I remember when I lived in Sheffield in the north of England, there was kind of like a big English mall that actually, funny, I worked at. I had like a little job in like a kind of like little discount bookstore in there. Mm-hmm. They kind of, I guess, got the proper books, but after they'd been out for a while, so they were like half price one Christmas. And I kind of like, and that was kind of fun. But again, it was like everything was overpriced. It was way too busy. Parking was a nightmare. Luckily, I think I got the tram to this place because we had a tram there. And I was just like, I really don't see. Again, like Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead, to bring it around. If you're 12, it's probably great because you got everything you want for a day out. You can meet your mates. You won't have your parents there. You can go see a movie. You can get ice cream. You can buy some clothes, buy some music. Back in the day when there was a music store. But for an adult, I think it's horrible.
Yeah, I mean, I quit going to the mall while I was working in malls. I mean, there wasn't really. I'd go during Christmas because it was a thing. It was part of kind of for an '80s kid, kind of a Christmas tradition was, that's where you'd go see Santa, and that's where they'd put all these decorations out, and there'd be music playing in all the stores and in the hallways.
Trances.
Yes, very trances. But yeah, it after that, we hardly ever went to the mall. There was just nothing to buy.
Thank you, Amazon. Stay at home, be antisocial. So what do you think? Final thoughts then on the dorms?
I'm not going to like go off on Zack Snyder's other work, but I do think this is, between a James Gunn script, which gives it some levity and kind of frames it in an interesting way and makes it, interesting enough. It's a good, I would watch them probably in that order. I'd watch the James Gunn one, the Zack Snyder one, and then I would go watch the Romero one if you've not seen them before or it's been a while. Because it's a difference between having a McDonald's meal and like a real meal.
I'll take your analogy and run with it. I will say Romero is a hearty fruitcake, and Zack Snyder has a big bag of icing, and he keeps shouting more icing, and just pouring it on. And you go, "No, Zack, that's too much." He goes, "No, more icing, more icing."
Yeah.
Until you have to physically wrestle him to the ground and take away his icing bag.
I'll go with that. I think that's probably the better analogy.
You know what we haven't mentioned? What do you think about the musical choices? Because we were talking about Goblin a little bit. So the original is kind of electronic score, I guess, kind of creepy, which I think works really well. Whereas, and there's actually a couple of classic songs put in there, I think, for when they're having fun in the mall. But mainly it's like, quite dissonant electronic score. And then of course Goblin did the international cut, which I think Goblin did add some stuff to that really helped. But in the Snyder one, I do still really remember quite vividly, even now. Is it Richard Cheese? Get Down with the Sickness from the remake. I mean, that still stands out to me. I remember that quite a lot. So, and I really like Johnny Cash over the opening credits, actually.
So I think Snyder bats about a 300 on music most of the time. I think this is a little higher batting average for him. I think it's interesting because I would be curious to see if James Gunn wrote those into the script.
I was thinking that. Yeah, I was thinking as well.
Because the Zack Snyder has now kind of become famous for doing these super on the nose songs, but he uses this Jim Carroll Band song at the end that also James Gunn uses in Suicide Squad.
Yeah.
And so I am betting James Gunn was like, you should use this, you should use that, there.
Yeah.
This is the tone, because I know he listens to music while he's writing to get the scene down. So I am betting
very Tarantino-ish.
Yeah. So I'm betting that had something to do with it. I definitely paid attention to some of the music because it's just weird and not of the era for the 1970s. And it doesn't have that same, the movie's sound itself is not the same kind of hollow, kind of, we're capturing all of this live. It's more polished, 70s sound than the indie, we're doing this by the seat of our pants thing that the original is. But I think it's an excellent music choice. And that said, it does keep you tense for the 2 hours and 20 minutes of the length of that movie.
It's threatening. Music. Yeah. Very ominous. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I would say, like I say, the original a classic. Definitely watch it if you haven't watched it. Watch one of the many versions. Watch all of them. And then, Snyder, I think he did very well. I think, definitely helped by the script. But, took a classic property and didn't screw it up, which is refreshing, to be honest. Most remakes do. I don't think he added much to it. But
I feel it's a completely different movie. I really do. I mean, it has a similar location and a similar theme, but
you're right. Actually, you're right. Yeah, you're totally right. Basically, it's just the mall zombies. That's it, really. Yeah. I mean, and they have a couple of nods. I mean, they've actually got Ken Foree turns up in there, little cameo as that preacher, doing his same lines, I think. And then, also, he's like, this is because people are gay, and he's kind of like some mad preacher on TV. And then there's I think the guy who played Roger is in it as although I miss him every time I watch it, but he's in it as an army colonel or something, I think, briefly. And then of course Tom Savini turns up as the sheriff on TV, you got to shoot him in the head.
That one I got a laugh, or the movie got a laugh out of me from him showing up and doing that. Yeah.
We got a Twitcher. Yeah. So it's kind of cool. Cool little nod of respect to the original. But yeah, definitely check him out for Halloween. Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we'll be back soon with more Halloween movies on the way, more sequels to classics that we hope you will also find to be classics or horrible. It depends on what we cover. So anyway, we'll be back soon. Thanks so much, Simon.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.
That about wraps it up for this edition of The Signal Watch, a production of the League of Melbotus. Thanks for sticking with us. If you enjoyed the podcast, we invite you to drop on by the Signal Watch blog, where you'll find write-ups of a wide variety of movies and more. We'd love to hear from you, so find us online and let us know what you think. Whether you prefer email, blog comments, or social media, we'll be happy to hear from you. We'll be back soon with more exceedingly high-quality content. So, until next time, God damn it, babies, you've got to be kind.